David pulled his black BMW into the parking spot outside Rosie's diner, the same spot he'd been using for the past 3 years. Tuesday meant chicken pot pie day, and even though he could afford to eat at the fanciest restaurants in the city, nothing beat Rosie's homemade cooking. The familiar red and white checkered awning brought a smile to his face as he stepped out of his car, adjusting his expensive suit jacket. The October wind was getting colder, and David noticed more people on the streets wearing heavy coats. He had built his software company from nothing, working 16-hour days in a tiny apartment, surviving on instant noodles and determination. Now, at 34, he was worth more money than he could spend in several lifetimes. But success hadn't changed his love for simple pleasures like a good meal at his favorite neighborhood spot. As he walked toward the diner's entrance, something caught his eye. A small figure stood pressed against the large front window, hands cupped around his face to block out the reflection. David slowed his pace, watching the boy who couldn't have been more than 12 years old. The kid was thin, wearing a jacket that was at least 3 sizes too big, with sleeves that hung past his fingertips. His jeans had holes in both knees, and his sneakers looked like they'd walked 1,000 miles. The boy wasn't moving. He just stood there staring through the glass at the families inside enjoying their lunch. David could see the child's breath fogging up the window as he watched a mother cutting up pancakes for her toddler at a corner booth. The boy's face held an expression David recognized, pure longing mixed with something that looked like hunger. David felt his chest tighten. He remembered being that age, standing outside toy stores during Christmas, knowing his single mother couldn't afford the things in the window. But this felt different. This wasn't about wanting something nice. This looked like genuine need. He decided to go inside first, telling himself he'd figure out what to do about the boy after he had lunch. But as he settled into his usual booth, David found himself watching the kid through the window. The boy hadn't moved. He was still there, still staring, still breathing fog onto the glass. "Your usual, honey?" asked Betty, the waitress who had been serving him since he first discovered this place. She was in her 50s, with graying hair always pulled back in a neat bun and a smile that made everyone feel welcome. "Actually, Betty, give me a minute," David said, his attention still on the window. "That boy outside, how long has he been there?" Betty followed his gaze and her expression grew sad. "Oh, that little one. He's been coming by for about a week now. Never causes trouble, never asks for anything, just stands there and watches. Breaks my heart, really." "Has anyone tried talking to him?" "Old Frank from the hardware store next door. Offered him a sandwich yesterday, but the boy said no thank you and walked away. Polite as can be, but wouldn't take anything." Betty shook her head. "Kids these days going hungry when there's good people willing to help." David nodded, making his decision. "I'll take my pot pie to go, Betty, and maybe throw in an extra sandwich and some of those chocolate chip cookies." "Planning to feed someone special?" Betty asked with a knowing smile. "Something like that." 20 minutes later, David walked out of the diner with a bag of food, his heart beating faster than usual. The boy was still at the window, but now he was sitting on the sidewalk, back against the brick wall. His small frame looked even tinier curled up like that. David approached slowly, not wanting to scare him. "Hey there," he said gently. The boy looked up, eyes wide and alert. They were brown eyes, too serious for someone so young. "I'm not doing anything wrong, sir. I'm not bothering anyone." "I know you're not." David crouched down to the boy's level. "I'm David. What's your name?" The child hesitated for a moment. "I'm Tyler." "Nice to meet you, Tyler. I was just having lunch in there and I saw you looking through the window. Are you hungry?" Tyler's face flushed red. "I don't want your money, sir. I'm not a beggar or anything." "I didn't think you were." David was struck by the boy's dignity. "But I ordered too much food and I hate to waste it. Would you help me out by eating some of it?" Tyler looked at the bag in David's hands, then back at his face. I'm okay. Thank you, though." David sat down on the sidewalk next to Tyler, ignoring the fact that his $1,000 suit was getting dirty. "You know, when I was about your age, I used to get really proud too. My mom called it stubborn. She'd say I'd rather starve than ask for help." Something in Tyler's expression changed. Your mom said that? All the time. She was probably right. David opened the bag and pulled out a wrapped sandwich. Turkey and cheese. Betty makes the best ones in the city. He unwrapped it and took a bite, then held it out. Want to try it? Tyler stared at the sandwich for a long moment. David could practically hear the boy's stomach growling. Finally, Tyler reached out and took it with both hands. Thank you, he whispered. Don't mention it. They sat in comfortable silence while Tyler ate. David noticed how carefully the boy chewed each bite, making the sandwich last as long as possible. When he was finished, Tyler wiped his mouth with the back of his sleeve. That was really good, Tyler said. I haven't had turkey in a while. Where do you usually eat? Tyler looked down at his hands. There's a soup kitchen about 6 blocks from here. They serve dinner most nights, and sometimes the church has food on Sundays. David felt his heart break a little more. Do you live around here? Kind of. My mom and I, we stay in different places. Tyler's voice got quieter. We used to have an apartment, but things got hard after my dad died. Mom lost her job, and then we couldn't pay rent anymore. The simple way Tyler explained their situation made it even more heartbreaking. No self-pity, no anger, just facts, delivered by a child who had grown up too fast. I'm sorry about your dad, David said. It's okay. He got sick and the doctors tried to help, but sometimes people just can't get better. Tyler looked up at the diner window again. Mom hasn't eaten since Sunday. The soup kitchen ran out of food yesterday before we got there. David felt something shift inside his chest. This wasn't just about one hungry kid anymore. Tyler, I want to ask you something, and I want you to think about it before you answer, okay? Tyler nodded. What if I told you I could help? Not just with food today, but really help. Would you let me? Tyler's eyes grew suspicious. What do you mean? I mean, what if you could bring your mom here tomorrow for lunch? Both of you could eat as much as you want, and maybe we could figure out how to make things better. Tyler stared at him for a long time. David could see the boy weighing his options, probably wondering if this stranger could be trusted. You'd really do that? Tyler asked finally. For both of us? I'd really do that. Tyler's eyes filled with tears he was trying hard not to let fall. Mom's going to think I'm lying when I tell her. Then bring her here tomorrow at noon and she'll see for herself. Tyler stood up quickly, brushing dirt off his oversized jeans. Noon tomorrow? Right here, I'll be waiting. Tyler started to walk away, then turned back. Mr. David, why are you being nice to us? David thought about that question. Because someone was nice to me once when I needed it. And because you remind me that there are still good people in the world. Tyler smiled for the first time since David had seen him. It was a genuine, hopeful smile that lit up his whole face. I'm going to go find Mom and tell her about tomorrow. David watched the boy disappear around the corner, walking with more energy than he'd shown all day. As he got back into his BMW, David realized his hands were shaking slightly. He had no idea what he was going to do tomorrow, but he knew he had to do something. That boy and his mother deserved better than sleeping in different places every night and hoping soup kitchens had enough food. Tomorrow couldn't come fast enough. David couldn't sleep that night. He kept thinking about Tyler's serious brown eyes and the way the boy had said his mother hadn't eaten since Sunday. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that thin figure pressed against the diner window, watching families enjoy their meals. The image haunted him in a way he hadn't expected. He got up at 3 in the morning and made himself coffee, standing in his luxury apartment kitchen with its granite counters and stainless steel appliances. The contrast felt overwhelming. Here, he was, surrounded by more than he could ever need, while a 12-year-old boy was somewhere in the cold city, probably lying awake worrying about his mother. David found himself walking to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. Somewhere out there, Tyler and his mom were spending another night without a real home. The thought made his stomach turn. He had worked so hard to get where he was, climbing out of poverty through determination and luck. But he'd never forgotten what it felt like to go to bed hungry, to watch his mother count pennies just to buy milk. By morning, David had made a decision that surprised even himself. This wasn't going to be just one lunch. He was going to do whatever it took to help this family get back on their feet. He had the resources, and he had met plenty of people over the years who could help with job placement, housing, and other services. The question was how to offer help without making Tyler's mother feel like charity case. At 10:30, David called Rosie's diner. Betty answered, weird with her usual cheerful voice. Betty, it's David. I have a favor to ask. Sure, honey. What do you need? Remember that boy who was outside yesterday? I'm bringing him and his mother in for lunch today. I was wondering if you could set aside one of the corner booths, maybe the one by the window where it's quiet. Of course, that's real sweet of you, David. The whole staff has been talking about that little one. We all hoped someone would help him. There's something else. I want to pay for their meal, but I don't want them to know how much it costs. Can you just bring them whatever they want and tell them it's taken care of? You got it, and David, good for you. That boy looked like he needed a guardian angel. After hanging up, David spent the rest of the morning researching local resources for homeless families. He made a list of organizations that could help with emergency housing, job training, and school enrollment. He also called his lawyer to ask about setting up a small fund that could help families in crisis situations. The more he planned, the more excited he became about making a real difference. At 11:45, David was already sitting in the corner booth at Rosie's, nervously checking his watch every few minutes. He had chosen casual clothes today, jeans and a sweater, hoping to seem less intimidating than he had in his business suit yesterday. Betty had prepared the table with extra napkins and had even put a small vase with fresh flowers in the center. You're more nervous than a father meeting his daughter's first boyfriend, Betty teased as she refilled his coffee cup. I just want this to go well. This kid and his mom have been through enough. At exactly noon, David saw Tyler approaching the diner. The boy was walking slower than yesterday, looking back frequently at someone following behind him. David's heart started beating faster as he waited to see Tyler's mother. When she appeared, David was struck by how young she looked. She couldn't have been more than 35, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and clothes that were clean but clearly worn. Even from a distance, he could see she was nervous, probably wondering what kind of stranger her son had met and whether this was safe. Tyler spotted David through the window and waved, then said something to his mother. She looked uncertain, but Tyler took her hand and gently pulled her toward the entrance. When they walked through the door, David stood up and smiled. Tyler, I'm so glad you came. Hi, Mr. David. This is my mom, Linda. Linda stepped forward hesitantly, her eyes cautious but kind. Tyler told me about your kindness yesterday. I want to thank you for feeding my son. Please have a seat, David said, gesturing to the booth. And there's no need to thank me. Anyone would have done the same thing. Linda slid into the booth, across from David with Tyler beside her. Actually, that's not true. Most people walk past us like we're invisible. What you did for Tyler was special. Betty appeared with menus and a warm smile. Welcome to Rosie's, I'm Betty. Any friends of David's or friends of ours? Tyler looked at the menu with wide eyes. Mom, look at all this food. Linda's face showed a mix of gratitude and embarrassment. Tyler, we should probably just order something small. Nonsense, David interrupted gently. Please order whatever sounds good, I insist. For the next few minutes, they studied the menus. David watched as Tyler pointed to different items, whispering excitedly to his mother about the pictures of hamburgers and milkshakes. Linda kept checking the prices, her face growing more worried. You know what? David said, closing his menu. Why don't we let Betty bring us a little bit of everything? That way we can all try different things. Oh, we couldn't, Linda started. Mom, Tyler said quietly. I told you he was nice. Linda looked at her son's hopeful face, then at David's sincere expression. Okay, but only if you let me figure out some way to pay you back. Deal, David said, though he had no intention of accepting any payment. Betty took their drink orders and disappeared into the kitchen. An awkward silence fell over the table until Tyler started talking about the different people he'd seen coming and going from the diner over the past week. There's this old man who comes in every morning at 8 and always sits at the counter. Tyler said. And a lady with red hair who brings her laptop and types for hours. Everyone seems happy here. Tyler notices everything, Linda said, pride evident in her voice. He's always been observant. His teachers used to say he was gifted. Used to? David asked carefully. Linda's face clouded over. We had to leave his school when our situation changed. He hasn't been in classes for about 2 months now. Tyler looked down at his hands. I miss school. I miss my friends and my teacher, Miss Rodriguez. She was teaching us about fractions. David felt his chest tighten again. This bright, curious boy should be in a classroom, not wandering the streets worrying about his next meal. Tyler, what was your favorite subject? Science, Tyler said immediately, his face lighting up. We were learning about space and planets. Did you know that Jupiter has over 70 moons? I did not know that. That's amazing. For the next hour, they talked and ate. Betty had brought enough food for 6 people, burgers, sandwiches, soup, salad, and even a chocolate cake for dessert. Tyler ate with obvious joy while Linda picked at her food, clearly uncomfortable with accepting so. Much as they were finishing, David decided it was time to make his real offer. Linda, I hope you don't mind me asking, but Tyler mentioned you've been having a hard time lately. Linda stiffened slightly. We're managing. It's temporary. I believe that. But what if I told you there might be a way to make the temporary part shorter? What do you mean? David leaned forward. I own a software company downtown. We're always looking for good people, and there are several organizations in the city that specialize in helping families get back on their feet. Would you be interested in learning about some opportunities? Linda's eyes filled with tears she was trying to hold back. I used to have a good job. I was an administrative assistant at a medical office. But when my husband got sick, I had to take so much time off, and then after he died, I couldn't focus on anything. They had to let me go. What kind of skills do you have? I'm good with computers, filing, scheduling. I managed the doctor's calendar and handled insurance paperwork. I'm organized and reliable. Linda's voice grew stronger as she talked about her abilities. At least I used to be reliable. You still are, Tyler said firmly. Mom's the smartest person I know. David smiled at the boy's fierce loyalty. Tyler's right, and those are exactly the kinds of skills my company needs. We're growing fast, and good administrative support is hard to find. Linda stared at him. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a chance. There would be an interview process, of course, but I'd like to help you get ready for it. And in the meantime, I know some people who can help with housing and getting Tyler back in school. Why? Linda asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Why would you do this for strangers? David was quiet for a moment, thinking about how to answer. Because someone helped me once when I had nothing. Because Tyler reminds me that there are still good people in this world who deserve a chance. And because I can. Tyler looked between his mother and David with hope shining in his eyes. Mom, can we try, please? Linda wiped away a tear that had escaped. I don't want charity. It's not charity. It's opportunity. There's a difference. Linda took a deep breath. What would I need to do? David pulled out his phone and showed her his business card on the screen. First, let me give you my number. Then, if you're willing, I'd like to help you put together a resume and practice interviewing. We can start whenever you're ready. I'm ready now, Linda said, her voice strong and determined. Tyler grinned. I told you he was nice, Mom. As they prepared to leave the diner, David realized this was just the beginning. Tomorrow, the real work would start, helping this family rebuild their lives. But looking at Tyler's excited face and Linda's renewed hope, he knew he was exactly where he was supposed to be. David arrived at Rosie's diner 30 minutes early the next day, his stomach churning with nervous energy. He had spent most of the night preparing for this meeting, printing out job applications, researching apartment complexes with reasonable rent, and making a list of questions to help Linda identify her strengths. His laptop bag was filled with papers, and his phone had contact numbers for 3 different social workers who specialized in helping homeless families. Betty greeted him with a knowing smile as he settled into the same corner booth. "You're early. Again. That family really got to you, didn't they?" "They remind me of my mom and me when I was Tyler's age," David admitted. "I keep thinking about how different my life would have been if no one had helped us." "Well, you turned out pretty good, so I'd say someone did something right." David was reviewing his notes when he heard the diner door chime. He looked up expecting to see Tyler's excited face, but instead saw the boy walking more slowly than usual, staying close to his mother's side. Linda looked nervous, constantly smoothing down her hair and adjusting her clothes. She was wearing the same outfit as yesterday, but David could tell she had made an effort to look as professional as possible. "Good morning," David called out, standing up to greet them. "I'm so glad you came." Tyler managed a small smile, but he seemed more subdued than the day before. "Hi, Mr. David. Mom was worried you might change your mind." "I would never do that," David said, looking directly at Linda. "I meant everything I said yesterday." As they settled into the booth, David noticed that Linda kept glancing around the diner like she was looking for something or someone. Her hands were shaking slightly as she reached for the water glass Betty had brought over. "Are you okay?" David asked gently. "I'm just nervous," Linda said. "It's been a long time since I interviewed for anything. What if I'm not ready? What if I've forgotten how to do this? That's exactly why we're here today. To practice and get you comfortable. There's no pressure." David pulled out a sample application form. "Why don't we start with the basics? Full name, previous work experience, that sort of thing." "Linda Catherine Rodriguez," she said, then spelled it out for him. David wrote it down, but something about the name felt familiar. He couldn't place it, though. Maybe he had known someone with the same last name in college. "And your previous job was at a medical office?" "Dr. Patterson's family practice clinic. I worked there for 8 years until..." Linda's voice trailed off. "That's a long time to stay in one position. That shows loyalty and reliability. What were your daily responsibilities?" As Linda began describing her work, David found himself getting distracted. There was something about her voice, the way she pronounced certain words, that seemed familiar. He kept stealing glances at her face, feeling like he was trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. "I managed patient scheduling, handled insurance claims, ordered supplies, and helped train new staff members," Linda was saying. "I also helped Dr. Patterson organize his research papers for medical conferences." "Research papers?" David looked up from his notes. "What kind of research?" He was studying the connection between poverty and health outcomes in urban communities. "I helped him organize data and format his presentations for conferences at the university." David's pen stopped moving. Something was clicking in his brain, but he couldn't quite grasp it yet. "Which university?" "State University downtown. He was a guest lecturer there sometimes." Linda paused, studying David's face. "You look like you've seen a ghost. Are you all right?" "I went to State University," David said slowly. "Computer science program. I graduated about 12 years ago." "Really? That's quite a coincidence." Linda seemed to relax a little. "Dr. Patterson used to say the computer science building had the smartest students on campus." David felt his heart rate increasing. 12 years ago, computer science building, research on poverty and health outcomes. A memory was trying to surface, but it felt like grasping at smoke. "Linda, this might sound strange, but did you ever work directly with any professors at the university? Not just Dr. Patterson, but anyone in the computer science department?" Linda's face went completely pale. Her water glass slipped from her hand, splashing water across the table. Tyler immediately started cleaning it up with napkins, but Linda sat frozen, staring at David with wide eyes. "Mom?" Tyler asked, concerned. "What's wrong?" "David," Linda whispered. "David Chen." The world seemed to stop moving. David felt like someone had knocked all the air out of his lungs. "Professor Rodriguez," he breathed. Tyler looked between them, confused. Do you guys know each other? David couldn't speak. The woman sitting across from him wasn't just Linda Rodriguez, struggling single mother. She was Dr. Linda Rodriguez, the computer science professor who had changed his entire life. The professor who had stayed late countless nights helping him debug code. The woman who had believed in his crazy idea for a social networking platform when everyone else called it stupid. The professor who had introduced him to the investor who gave him his first real funding. I don't understand, Linda said, shaking her head. This can't be happening. David Chen was one of my students, but he was just a kid. He was brilliant, but he was 22 years old and could barely afford textbooks. Professor, it's me. It's really me. David's voice cracked with emotion. You used to let me eat lunch in your office when I couldn't afford food from the cafeteria. You helped me apply for those emergency student loans when my mom got sick. Linda covered her face with her hands. Oh my God. David. My David. When? She looked up. Tears were streaming down her cheeks. Look at you. Look at what you became. Tyler sat quietly, watching this emotional reunion with the mature understanding of a child who had seen his mother cry many times. Mom, how do you know Mr. David? I was his teacher, sweetheart, a long time ago before you were born. I taught him computer programming. And she did a lot more than that, David added, his own eyes wet with tears. Professor Rodriguez, you saved my life. Everything I have, everything I accomplished started in your classroom. I can't believe this, Linda said, shaking her head in amazement. When you told me you owned a software company, I never imagined. David, what are the chances? What happened to you? David asked. You just disappeared from the university 5 years ago. I tried to find you, to thank you properly for everything you did for me. The department said you had resigned, but no one knew where you went. Linda's face crumpled. Everything fell apart at once. My husband got cancer, and the treatments were so expensive. I took leave from the university to take care of him, but then he died anyway. The medical bills were overwhelming, and I had to use all our savings just to pay for his funeral. But why didn't you come back to teaching? I tried, Linda said, wiping her eyes. But I was pregnant with Tyler and I was grieving and I couldn't focus on anything. I made some mistakes with my classes and the department suggested I take more time off. Then Tyler was born, and he was so small and needed so much care. By the time I was ready to go back, they had filled my position. David felt like his heart was breaking and soaring at the same time. The woman who had given him everything was the same woman who needed his help now. Professor, why didn't you reach out to me? I would have helped. I would have done anything. Because I was ashamed, Linda admitted. I was supposed to be the professor, the one with all the answers. How could I call my former student and tell him I was homeless? How could I admit that I had failed so completely? You didn't fail, David said firmly. Life happened to you. Terrible, unfair things that were completely out of your control. Tyler had been listening quietly, but now he spoke up. Mom, does this mean Mr. David was your student like I was Miss Rodriguez's student? Yes, baby. A very special student. Tyler looked at David with new understanding. That's why you wanted to help us. Because Mom helped you first. David nodded, unable to trust his voice. He thought about all the times he had wished he could thank Professor Rodriguez properly, all the success he had wanted to share with her. And here she was, needing help just as desperately as he had needed it 12 years ago. Professor, David said finally, I meant what I said yesterday about the job, but it's not charity anymore. It's the very least I can do to pay back someone who gave me everything. Linda was crying again, but this time they looked like tears of relief. I can't believe you're the same shy kid who used to sit in the back row of my introduction to programming class. I can't believe the professor who changed my life is Tyler's mom. Betty appeared with fresh napkins and coffee, taking in the emotional scene with knowing eyes. Looks like you folks have a lot to catch up on. More than you know, David said, looking at the woman who had shaped his future and the boy who had brought them back together. More than you could ever know. For the next hour, David and Linda sat in the corner booth of Rosie's diner. trying to piece together the years that had separated them. Tyler had moved to sit next to David, fascinated by the stories his mother was telling about the young man who had once been her student. "You were so determined," Linda said, a small smile breaking through her tears. "I remember you coming to my office hours every week with a notebook full of questions. You always apologized for taking up my time, but you were asking the smartest questions I'd heard in years." "I was terrified I wasn't smart enough to make it," David admitted. "Coming from where I came from, being in college felt like pretending to be someone I wasn't." "Where did you come from?" Tyler asked curiously. David looked at Linda, who nodded encouragingly. "My mom cleaned office buildings at night to pay for our tiny apartment. I worked at a gas station after classes and on weekends. There were a lot of nights when we had to choose between paying for electricity or buying groceries." Tyler's eyes widened. "Just like us now. Just like you now," David confirmed. "That's why your mom helping me was so important. She didn't just teach me programming. She taught me that I belonged there, that my ideas mattered." Linda reached across the table and squeezed David's hand. "You belonged there because you worked harder than anyone else. I just reminded you of what you already had inside." Betty refilled their coffee cups and brought Tyler a hot chocolate with extra marshmallows. The diner was getting busy with the lunch crowd, but their corner booth felt like a private world where past and present were colliding in the most unexpected way. "Professor, I need to ask you something," David said gently. "What really happened after your husband died? I know you said the medical bills were expensive, but how did things get so bad?" Linda's face grew serious. She looked at Tyler, who was stirring his hot chocolate and pretending not to listen, though David could tell the boy was paying attention to every word. "It's okay, Mom," Tyler said quietly. "I know most of it anyway." Linda sighed. "After Michael died, I thought the worst was over. I had used up all our savings paying for treatments that insurance wouldn't cover, but I figured I could work my way back to stability. I was wrong about a lot of things." "What do you mean?" "First, I discovered that Michael had taken out a second mortgage on our house without telling me. He was trying to pay for experimental treatments, hoping he could beat the cancer. When he died, I learned I owed almost twice what the house was worth." David felt his stomach drop. "You lost your house?" "Within 6 months. I tried to work extra hours at Dr. Patterson's office, but I was pregnant and exhausted all the time. I was making mistakes, missing appointments, forgetting important tasks. Dr. Patterson was understanding, but his patients were starting to complain." Tyler spoke up. "Mom used to fall asleep at her desk. I remember because she told me about it later. I was so tired," Linda continued. "Grieving Michael, worrying about money, and growing a baby all at the same time. My brain just stopped working the way it used to." "What about Tyler's father?" David asked carefully. Linda's cheeks turned red. "That's the part I'm most ashamed of. Michael had a best friend named Robert who helped me through everything after the funeral. He was kind and supportive, and I was so broken that I mistook his kindness for something more. When I told him I was pregnant, he disappeared completely. Changed his phone number, moved to a different city. I never heard from him again." Tyler reached over and patted his mother's arm. "It's okay, Mom. We don't need him anyway. By the time Tyler was born, I had lost the house and was living in a small apartment across town," Linda continued. "Dr. Patterson had to let me go because I couldn't focus on my work anymore. I tried to go back to the university, but they said my position had been filled and there weren't any other openings. Didn't they offer you any help? Counseling or temporary leave?" "They offered counseling, but I couldn't afford it. And temporary leave doesn't pay the bills. I applied for other teaching jobs, but I had to explain why I left my last position. And once schools heard about my performance problems, they weren't interested." David was horrified. The brilliant professor who had helped him build his future had been abandoned by the very system she had served for so many years. "What did you do then?" "I took whatever jobs I could find. Retail, food service, cleaning offices like your mother used to do. But with a baby, it was hard to work the hours they wanted. Tyler got sick a lot his first year, and I had to miss work to take care of him. I got fired from 3 jobs in 6 months. That's when we started moving around a lot, Tyler added matter-of-factly. Mom couldn't always pay rent on time. Linda's voice grew quieter. I kept thinking things would get better. I applied for government assistance, but there were waiting lists for everything. Housing assistance had a 2-year wait. Food stamps helped, but not enough. I was always one emergency away from disaster. What kind of emergencies? Tyler broke his arm when he was 4, and the emergency room bill was $800. Our car broke down and needed $1,000 in repairs. I got the flu and missed a week of work and lost another job. Every time I started to get ahead, something would knock me back down. David couldn't believe what he was hearing. This was the same woman who had stayed late helping him perfect his business plan, who had connected him with mentors and investors who had believed in his success when he couldn't even imagine it. I tried going back to school to update my skills, Linda continued, but I couldn't afford tuition and the free programs had waiting lists. I looked into online courses, but we couldn't always afford internet service. What about family? Friends? From the university? Linda shook her head sadly. My parents died when I was young and Michael was an only child like me. As for friends from work, it's amazing how quickly people disappear when you're no longer their colleague. I was too proud to reach out anyway. I kept thinking I could solve this on my own. Tyler looked up at David. Mom's really smart, but sometimes smart people have bad luck too. That's exactly right, David said, ruffling the boy's hair. Intelligence doesn't protect you from life. The hardest part, Linda said, her voice barely above a whisper, was watching Tyler grow up in this chaos. He's never had a stable home, never had a chance to make lasting friendships. He's brilliant, just like his mother was in school. But he's missed so much education. I don't mind, Tyler said loyally. We take care of each other. But you shouldn't have to take care of your mother, Linda said, tears starting again. You should be worried about homework and video games, not where we're going to sleep tonight. David felt overwhelmed by the unfairness of it all. While he had been building his company and accumulating wealth beyond his wildest dreams, the woman who had made it all possible had been struggling just to survive. The irony was almost too much to bear. Professor, David said firmly, I want you to listen to me very carefully. What happened to you wasn't your fault. You didn't fail. Life threw you a series of impossible challenges, and you survived them. You kept Tyler safe and healthy and turned him into an amazing kid. That's not failure, that's heroism. Linda wiped her eyes. I don't feel like a hero. I feel like I let everyone down, especially Tyler. Mom, Tyler said seriously, you didn't let me down. We're a team. David looked at this mother and son who had been through so much together, and his respect for both of them grew even deeper. Tomorrow he would start the process of changing their lives, but today, he just wanted them to know they weren't alone anymore. You're not just a team, David said. Now you're part of a bigger team. And this time, we're going to win. 3 weeks later, David sat in his office on the 32nd floor looking out at the city skyline. Everything had changed since that day at Rosie's diner. His assistant knocked on the door and poked her head in. David, Linda, and Tyler are here for your lunch meeting. Send them in, please. The door opened and Tyler burst through first, wearing a brand new school uniform and carrying a backpack covered in space-themed stickers. His face was bright with excitement as he ran over to David's desk. Mr. David, look what I got in science class today. Tyler pulled out a worksheet with a big red A+ at the top. We're studying the solar system and I remembered what you told me about Jupiter's moons. That's fantastic, Tyler. I'm so proud of you. Linda followed behind her son, and David was amazed by the transformation. She was wearing a professional, navy blue dress and had her hair styled in a way that made her look confident and polished. But more than her appearance, it was the light in her eyes that had returned. She looked like the Professor Rodriguez he remembered from college. How was your first week at Hamilton Elementary? David asked Tyler as they settled into the chairs around his conference table. It's amazing. My teacher, Mrs. Park, said I'm already caught up with my grade level in math, and she's going to give me extra reading books because I finished all the ones she assigned. Tyler bounced in his chair with enthusiasm. And I made 2 friends already, Jason and Alex. They want to come over to our apartment this weekend. Our apartment, Linda repeated with a smile. I still can't believe we have our own place again. David grinned. The two-bedroom apartment he had helped them find was nothing fancy, but it was clean, safe, and affordable. More importantly, it was theirs. Tyler finally had his own room for the first time in years, and Linda had a quiet space where she could work on the online courses she had started taking. How are the computer programming classes going? David asked Linda. Better than I expected. It's amazing how much has changed in 5 years, but the basics are still the same. Your company's education budget is incredibly generous. David had insisted that Linda take refresher courses in the latest programming languages and software systems. He wanted her to be fully prepared for the position he had in mind for her, something much better than a basic administrative job. Actually, that's what I wanted to talk to you both about today, David said, pulling out a folder from his desk. Linda, I have a proposal for you. What kind of proposal? I've been thinking about what you told me, about how you used to help Dr. Patterson with his research on poverty and health outcomes. And I remembered how you always talked about using technology to solve real-world problems. Linda leaned forward, interested. What are you thinking? My company has been wanting to expand into educational technology, specifically programs that help kids who are struggling in school because of problems at home. Kids like kids like I used to be. Tyler looked up from the spacebook he had been flipping through. What kind of programs? Online tutoring for kids who miss school a lot. Learning games that work on phones so kids can study even if they don't have computers at home. Systems that help teachers identify students who might need extra support. Linda's eyes were getting wider as David spoke. That sounds incredible. But what does this have to do with me? I want you to head up the whole project. Design the programs, manage the team, work with schools to implement everything. It's not just a job, Linda. It's a chance to change thousands of kids' lives. Me? But I've been out of education for 5 years. I don't have experience with educational technology. You have something better. You understand what it's like to struggle. You know what kids like Tyler need because you've lived it. And you have the teaching background to know what actually works in classrooms. Tyler jumped up from his chair. Mom, you should do it. You could help kids like me. Linda was quiet for a long moment, staring at the folder David had placed in front of her. What if I'm not ready? What if I fail again? Professor, David said gently, using her old title. You didn't fail before. Life knocked you down, but you got back up. You kept Tyler safe and happy through impossible circumstances. That's not failure. That's strength. But this is such a big responsibility. 12 years ago, you took a big responsibility when you decided to help a scared kid from a poor family who thought he didn't belong in college. Look how that turned out. Linda opened the folder and started reading the project outline David had prepared. As she read, her expression changed from uncertainty to excitement. This section about mobile learning platforms, this could really work for families who move around a lot. Exactly. And this part about identifying at-risk students early, before they fall too far behind. We could partner with social services, maybe even with programs that help homeless families. Linda was getting animated now, the way she used to get when discussing a particularly interesting coding problem. David, this could make a real difference. So you'll do it? Linda looked at Tyler, who was nodding enthusiastically, then back at David. On one condition. What's that? I want Tyler to be involved somehow, not in a work way, but as a consultant. He understands what kids in tough situations need better than any adult. Tyler beamed. I could test the games and make sure they're actually fun. Deal, David said, extending his hand to Linda. Welcome to Chen Technologies, Director Rodriguez. As they shook hands, David felt a sense of completeness he hadn't expected. The scared college student and the caring professor had found each other again, and this time they were going to help other families avoid the struggles they had both faced. 6 months later, David stood at the back of a packed auditorium at State University. Linda was on stage, presenting the preliminary results of their educational technology pilot program to a conference of educators and social workers. Tyler sat in the front row wearing a tie and taking notes like he was one of the attendees. Our mobile learning platform has reached over 2,000 students in its first phase, Linda was saying. These are kids who missed an average of 40 school days per year due to housing instability, family crises, or other challenges beyond their control. The audience was completely engaged as Linda explained how the program worked. She had transformed from the broken woman David had found outside the diner into a confident leader who was changing the education landscape. The results speak for themselves, Linda continued. Participating students showed a 60% improvement in math scores and a 70% improvement in reading comprehension. But more importantly, we've seen increased school attendance and higher engagement in traditional classroom settings. The applause was thunderous. David felt tears in his eyes as he watched his former professor receive the recognition she deserved. After her presentation, reporters surrounded Linda with questions about expanding the program nationally. Later that evening, the three of them returned to Rosie's diner for dinner. Betty greeted them like family, as she had every week for the past 6 months. The usual table? Betty asked with a wink. Always, David replied. As they settled into their corner booth, Tyler pulled out his tablet and showed them a new learning game his friends at school had helped him design. It's about fractions, but it's set in space and you have to divide up resources for different planets. That's brilliant, Linda said, examining the game. We should definitely include this in the next update. David watched them discussing the technical aspects of the game, marveling at how perfectly everything had worked out. Tyler was thriving in school and had become an unofficial junior consultant for their education projects. Linda had not only found her confidence again, but had become one of the most respected voices in educational technology. You know what I realized today? David said as Betty brought their food. What's that? Linda asked. That day when I first saw Tyler outside this window, I thought I was just helping a hungry kid. I had no idea I was about to get my mentor back and find the perfect person to lead the most important project of my career. Life has a funny way of working out, Linda agreed. Sometimes the people who need help the most are the ones who end up helping others. Tyler looked up from his tablet. Mom, does this mean our story has a happy ending? Linda smiled and ruffled his hair. No, sweetheart. This isn't an ending. This is just the beginning of a much bigger story. David raised his coffee cup in a toast. To new beginnings and second chances. To the best teacher I ever had, Tyler added, clinking his milk glass against theirs. And to the best students, Linda finished, her voice full of love and gratitude. Outside the diner window, the city lights twinkled in the darkness, full of families facing their own struggles and dreams. But inside their corner booth, 3 people, who had found each other again, were already planning how to help others write their own stories of hope and second chances.